Well, looks like the Denver Broncos are going to be underdogs once again, and that is good news for this young, hungry team. But before we talk about that, guys, I want to shout out the affiliate partner for today's video, Green Gridiron Helmets. Use code DENSYN, DENSYN, link in the description below to save off your first purchase on authentic NFL helmets. From small replicas like this one behind me to full-size authentic helmets. Again, that is code DENSYN, DENSYN, link in the description below to save off your first purchase from Green Gridiron Helmets. Thank you so much to them. And now back to your regularly scheduled content. So, we get to hear from everybody's favorite hot take artist, Nick Wright, today. On their show, they were doing a game of over-under. Which team is going to hit their over on their win total and which team is going to hit the under on their win total. And the Denver Broncos were the team that they were focusing on today. And Nick Wright offered up one of his worst takes yet, and that's saying something. Now remember, like I like to say with all of these hot take shows, they are meant to be viewed as entertainment, not actual analysis. If you want to see actual analysis on one of these ESPN or FS1 programs, I highly recommend you go watch NFL Live on ESPN. Mina Kimes, Dan Orlovsky, all of those guys over there do a fantastic job. And I would highly recommend, if you're looking for real analysis, go watch them. Or watch some of these small YouTube channels like Broncos Syndicate that provide real analysis instead of throwing around hot takes. The reason why these hot take shows are so popular is because everybody likes to throw around their worst takes on social media and laugh and make fun of them. And these guys get paid a lot of money to get laughed and made fun of for some of their worst takes. And that's what they do for a living. They've accepted it. And hey, man, more power to them because they make millions upon millions of dollars doing it. But Nick Wright is going to offer up this really spicy take here. I can't bring the video in for copyright reasons, but let's go ahead and take a listen to what Sir Nick Wright has to say.
You can start here, Nick. Broncos.
So, listen, should be noted, last year, I said before the year, my favorite over
Volume's coming up, fair warning.
Was the Denver Broncos. Now, I think Coach had them in the playoffs. Is that correct? Do you have Denver in the playoffs?
I think so.
Okay, so maybe Colin was somebody, but I didn't have them in the playoffs, but I thought they would be good last year. This is not me always being against the Broncos. My favorite under of the season is the Broncos this year. I think they're going to end up being the worst team in that division. I think that the Chargers in the second year under Harbaugh should be a good regular season team. If they make the playoffs, I think we know what to expect from Justin Herbert in that spot at this point, but that doesn't matter. You guys know I think the Raiders will be vastly improved. People think that I need to admit I was wrong about Bo Nix. I think it's going to be a glorious category too, where it will be proven out the way people thought I needed to admit I was wrong about Mac Jones.
Well, we changed offensive coordinator.
Okay, well, I'm sure that's what it was. But the older, experienced, low-ceiling, high-floor quarterbacks that look good in year one don't always take that big jump in year two. And, in fact, sometimes they go backwards because there's so much more film on them. And I don't love the weapons the Broncos have. I expect them to probably draft a running back with their first-round pick, which should help. But I think the Broncos are the worst team in this division. Yikes. And so I think the Broncos are probably 7-10, so I love the under.
Good Lord, Nick Wright, man. That is one of his takes of all time. Let's just put it that way. So, the Broncos being the worst team in the AFC West behind the Raiders. Yes, I will admit that the Raiders are going to be vastly improved this year. Geno Smith, in my opinion, is a top 10 quarterback in the NFL. Pete Carroll is a great head coach to bridge them forward to their next head coach of the future because, let's just be honest here, Pete Carroll is not going to be coaching this team for more than 3-4 years at max. So I do think the Raiders are primed to take a big step forward from where they were last year, where they were basically a laughingstock of the NFL. But I do not think that they are going to be in position to make the playoffs this year. And if they do, they're probably going to be making it as the 7th seed, meaning that they're going to be 4th place in the division. I think that the Denver Broncos are very much primed to challenge the Kansas City Chiefs for 1st in the division this year, and that's before they make moves in the draft where they can add to their running back room, their tight end room, their defensive line room, their linebacker room maybe, and bolster these last positions of need on their roster and allow them to really contend for the top spot in the AFC West. Remember, folks, they were a special teams blunder away from beating the Kansas City Chiefs in Kansas City. They were almost there. They could have swept Kansas City this year. Again, the team that they played in Week 18 was not the Kansas City Chiefs. That was a JV backup squad that should not be accounted for, really, in terms of teams that the Denver Broncos beat. But at the end of the day, man, the Denver Broncos really are that close to competing with the Chiefs, especially when you consider the overall roster regression in Kansas City. They got rid of one of their best offensive linemen in Joe Thuney. They are losing some other pieces as well. So Kansas City might be in a position where they take a step back and the Denver Broncos take the step forward. They've made some big moves in free agency, the Denver Broncos have, bringing in a pass-catching tight end in Evan Ingram, bringing in a safety in Talanoa Hufanga, and a linebacker in Dre Greenlaw, who are hopefully going to bridge those last little bit of gaps that you have on the defense. So at the end of the day, man, the Denver Broncos have made moves to get better. Kansas City has not done so. And I would also argue that the Chargers have not really made moves to get better. They've made moves to really stay where they were last year. They brought in Najee Harris at running back. I think that's a lateral move, and when you compare it to having Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins last year. Then they brought in Mike Williams at wide receiver. Okay, probably not going to be a big difference maker like Mike Williams was, say, 3 years ago for the Chargers. I don't think you're getting the 2022 or 2021 version of Mike Williams, whatever year it was that he had that crazy, insane year. So I don't think the Chargers made any moves to get better. Denver did, and the Raiders did. I think we could see a scenario where all four teams in the AFC West make the playoffs. You're tentatively going to pencil in the Kansas City Chiefs to win the division until they prove otherwise. That just is what you have to do. But there's no reason why Denver can't push for second in the division or even first in the division with all the moves that they have made and will continue to make throughout the draft. Again, I don't think that the Chargers have made moves to really improve their team as a whole. We'll see what happens over the course of the draft. I think they've kind of just stayed where they were. The Raiders have made some big time moves, and if they do indeed draft Ashton Genty, then that might propel them even more forward. But I don't think that the Raiders are going to push for anything more than fourth or maybe third in the division at best. The Denver Broncos are not going to go 7-10 like Nick Wright said. And now let's get into the Bo Nix side of things, because we've got Nick Wright saying that we're going to do a full turnaround here with Bo Nix, and everybody's going to say that he was correct, and he's going to turn into the second coming of Mac Jones. Let me tell you why Mac Jones failed at the NFL level. And another example of what Nick Wright claims to be a low ceiling, high floor quarterback, Daniel Jones. You know why these guys failed? Because they were put in situations to fail. Both of them had changes at head coach and offensive coordinator. Well, not head coach for Mac Jones, but change at offensive coordinator and head coach in the case of Daniel Jones in year two. They had to learn completely different offensive systems. And in the case of Mac, the system that he was learning was being installed by a defensive coordinator in Matt Patricia and a former special teams coach in Joe Judge. Then Daniel Jones had to deal with Jason Garrett as his offensive coordinator and Joe Judge as well as his head coach in year two. Then they finally had some stability with Brian Daboll, but by that point, Daniel Jones hadn't ever developed any of his warts that he had in his game. He never improved off of them, and that's why he never was able to improve as a player. Kind of the same thing with Mac Jones. You look at that year under Matt Patricia and company, his footwork regressed, his decision-making regressed, everything regressed with Mac Jones, and it just got to the point where he was no longer a startable player. The Denver Broncos shouldn't have to worry about any of that with Bo Nix because he's got continuity at head coach and offensive play caller with Sean Payton, and he's got continuity at quarterback coach with Davis Webb. Those are huge things that cannot be understated. Instead of having to learn an entirely different system in year two, Bo Nix is going to be able to master this current Sean Payton system and take that next step in his development in this current system in year two. That is huge. As far as the weapons are concerned, I think that the Denver Broncos did a really good job adding to their pass catching room with Evan Ingram. That's going to be a big addition. I think that they can bring in another inline tight end as well. That will help. They're probably going to bring in another receiver at some point. Denver feels a lot more confident about their weapon room than the mass media does in the case here of Nick Wright. Additionally, they will bring in an RB1 in the first 2 rounds of the draft. I am very much assured that they're going to bring in a running back at least in round 2, if not in round 1. They're going to bring in their RB1 of the future. So at the end of the day, man, Nick Wright is just completely off on his quote-unquote analysis here. And like I said earlier, these shows should not meant to be taken as analysis. They should be taken as entertainment. If you want analysis, watch these YouTube channels like Broncos Syndicate, Sports Talk Denver, Let's Talk Broncos, Mile High Huddle. These are all YouTube channels, and I'm missing plenty of others as well that are excellent, that provide actual analysis, and then NFL Live on ESPN if you want something on a more large scale. But don't watch Nick Wright show. Don't watch these hot take artists like Skip Bayless, who's just doing YouTube now. But don't watch these hot take shows if you want actual analysis. Don't watch Stephen A. Smith and Shannon Sharp. Watch smaller creators or watch actual analysts, not these hot take artists. All right, Broncos country, be sure to leave a like on this video as well, subscribe and ring the bell, and let me know in the comment section below, guys, how do you feel about the Denver Broncos being labeled as underdogs once again? Me personally, I love it because the Denver Broncos used it as a chip on their shoulder, fuel to add to the fire last year, and they were able to exceed expectations. I think they could do the same thing again this year and exceed the expectations that are already being set for them by Vegas at 9.5 wins. All right, guys, and until next time, I'm your host, Gage Madrid, saying peace out.